Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to Lyoko Retrospectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 62 of Code Lyoko, Nobody in Particular. So in this episode, what's going on is that Jeremy thinks that he has a plan, thinks that he has found a way to directly virtualize the group into Sector 5. However, he doesn't really, while he has a good enough outline for this, unfortunately he still thinks there's still a margin of error and he needs to test it out. As a result, the group kind of does a rough equivalent of pulling straws to see who has to be the guinea pig, and unfortunately, Ulrich is the one that does it. As such, the group goes to Lyoko, and Yumi, Aelita, and Odd go to Sector 5 ahead of Ulrich, but and pretty much Jeremy tests out the program on Ulrich, and in the beginning it seems to have not worked, as they can't as he doesn't as while the scan happened, unfortunately they can't seem to find anything. No, he doesn't seem to be appearing, and when Jeremy tries to do a scan for Ulrich, he can't seem to find him. It's like he just vanished. Of course, the group gets upset about this, but Jeremy promises that he will fix it, though nobody's in high spirits about this, with Jeremy working all night and Aelita, Odd, and Yumi just kind of being scared and sad, the way you would do if say you lost a friend. However, that night, the scanner seems to activate, and Ulrich steps out. And from his perspective, it's like he just stepped in and now he's stepped out. As a result, he starts wondering what the heck's going on, because nobody's around. So he tries to leave the factory. Only his hand seems to phase right through the button for the elevator, since that's how he tries getting out. He does eventually manage to find his way out and back to the dorms, but when he tries going to Jeremy's room, he can't seem to see him. Made even stranger by the fact when Odd and Aelita step in and they all are talking as if he's not in the room. However, Kiwi seems to be able to see him since Odd brought him with, and he leaps at Ulrich. And when he does, Ulrich's actually able to actually enters Kiwi's mind, which allows him to communicate with the group because, as we've established in Code Lyoko, they're a form of body swapping and also involves voices going with them too. So he's able to tell them that somehow he's just that he's lost his body, and that the only way he's communicating with them is through Kiwi. However, they're trying to so while the group is relieved that Ulrich's okay, this still brings up the question of where the heck his body is. And as such, Jeremy kind of comes to the conclusion that the scan somehow separated Ulrich's mind and body, which I'm actually inclined to believe, because when it comes to Lyoko, we've established that things can get a little strange when it comes to the virtualization process, and I can believe that somehow the scanners combined with Lyoko's oddities and the fact that Xander can create his own little phantoms it would kind of make sense for them to kind of create for him an out of phase body, just kind of existing on a different frequency. So I can buy that his mind is essential and his body are pretty much separated. The only reason his mind is still able to walk around is because, again, possibly out of sync with the rest of the world, and Lyoko generating the supercomputer possibly generating it as like an avatar, so to speak. Bottom line, though, he can interact with the real world and he can possess people, like with Xana, but in the meantime, this does show a case that he's okay, which they immediately this does showcase that Ulrich's okay. As such, Jeremy decides that Jeremy says that he's going to go to the factory and see if he can locate Ulrich's body then, because if his mind's okay, his body's got to be somewhere. So he and Aelita go to the factory, which they're able to do since since there are no classes that day, so everything's fine. But Ulrich decides to take advantage of his situation and go possess Jim. You see, in their science class, it turns out their science teacher, I forgot her name, I think Mrs. Hertz, essentially is kind of bringing the hammer down on Ulrich. He's failing most of his classes, and he's just barely putting in any effort anymore. As such, there's an academic academic review coming up, wherein the faculty will be meeting and pretty much evaluating the people, pretty much evaluating what everyone's going to be doing. Just evaluating each of the students and seeing if they're good, if they're doing well, if they need to be transferred, etc., etc. As such, since Jim is part of that faculty, Ulrich tries to use him to get to Mrs. Hertz, but unfortunately she's not budging. As such, the meeting comes around, and Ulrich and Odd kind of end up having to go because Odd's the student class rep, so he has to be there. But at the same time, Jeremy does manage to locate Ulrich's body on Lyoko. Unfortunately, it seems to be moving, which everyone immediately thinks is weird because without Ulrich there, how is the body moving on its own? As such, Aelita and Yumi end up going to Lyoko and head to Sector 5, and it turns out the reason why it's moving is because Xana hijacked it. It's he's now as Xana is now using him to run through Sector 5 and try to get to the core of Lyoko so he can destroy it. Yumi and Aelita end up following after, but fortunately, Ulrich, quote unquote, manages to get to the core first, and he has some mantas guarding his path. And so while they're trying to dispatch them, Ulrich's body is still left unguarded, doesn't have anything to contend with. So he's trying to destroy the core with actually a pretty cool laser ability, as Xana's using his katana to pretty much blast this green laser at the core, which makes me think that Ulrich could possibly do that on his own if he had enough time and training. So that's kind of cool. In the meantime, Ulrich does manage to convince Mrs. Hertz to, again, I think that's her name, correct me if I'm wrong, to give him a second chance and not have him get sent down to 9th grade remedial. And so after that, after that, Ulrich and Odd, once that's taken care of, Ulrich and Odd manage to make it to the factory. And pretty much what the plan is that they need to devirtualize Ulrich on Lyoko, so that and once he's devirtualized, his mind and body will be able to be reconstituted inside one of the scanners. As such, while Yumi and Aelita are both devirtualized by the monsters, they're able to take them out with them, and thankfully, Odd is able to get there in time so that he's able to fight off Ulrich's body and get it devirtualized where it's reunited with Ulrich in the real world. As such, the episode ends with Ulrich saving Jim from a prank, since Ulrich wound up falling for it while he was possessing Jim, and Mrs. Hertz going to Jim wanting to get dance lessons because the only way that Ulrich could convince her to let him have another chance was by promising to teach her dance lessons, which, again, since he was possessing Jim, that means Jim technically made the promise, and since Jim doesn't remember any of that, she pretty much kicks his ass. I'm not even kidding. We don't see what happens, but it's clear someone got flipped. So, yeah. I actually really like this episode. I'm not gonna lie. Like, for starters, it's nice to see Jeremy working on on the methods of trying to get them into Sector 5, because again, last episode the ice sector was destroyed, so having the virtualization program for Sector 5 on ready, it's a definite priority. So it's nice to see him putting in some work on that and seeing it progress. And another thing that I think really works is just kind of what happens because of this thing. It's interesting to see the problem and seeing Ulrich getting out of phase with his body, which also leads to some nice character stuff, which I'll talk about in a minute. But because of Ulrich's situation, it leads to some honestly very funny cringe comedy. Like, we see him going into Jim's body to try and fix his grade, which, honestly, I'm okay with this because it makes total sense. Because while Ulrich doesn't want to stay stuck as a ghost, so to speak, at the same time, he's in kind of a crappy situation, so of course he would take advantage of the situation to try and fix something in his life. So it's actually kind of amusing to see him do that and appealing to Mrs. Hertz as much as he can. So yeah, I kind of like that. On top of that, another thing that I do like is just kind of seeing, again, Xana take advantage of the situation. He doesn't have a big plan in this case. It's just him possessing one of the Lyoko warriors. We've seen, because, again, something we've established with this season is that Xana has found a way to get around the possession thing. In this case, he doesn't need to use that because the body was left vacant, so why not? But at the same time, it is interesting to actually see him possess one of the warriors beyond Aelita, because Aelita, we've seen her get possessed before, and the thing is, she's kind of the de facto person to get possessed, because, like we showcased, she has admin access, so she's the one that can access the tower. She's the only one of the Lyoko warriors that can access the towers and deactivate them, or possibly delete the sectors, which is what Xana has used her for in the past. So, just see him actively possessing one of the warriors and being more in combat, even using their own abilities against the other warriors, it's actually kind of cool to see that happen. And just minor spoiler, this isn't the last time Xana's going to do something like that with someone besides Aelita. So it is kind of cool to see that. Plus, again, that laser ability from his katana. I think that'd be cool. And I think if Ulrich And I feel like that if this wasn't some new ability that Xana exclusively gave to Ulrich while he was possessing him, I think it would be cool to see Ulrich learn to take advantage of that in regular battles. I don't think he does, but again, I think it'd be kind of cool. So so I'm trying to think what else I like about the episode. I guess I could probably go more into the cringe comedy aspect. Again, I like watching that because it's just like pure cringe. Like throughout the whole thing, I'm just thinking, oh God, why? Throughout the whole thing, because again, it does make sense for Ulrich to do this, because it's completely in character. He's in a tight spot, and while he doesn't want to get stuck there, he wants to take advantage of it. And on the off chance they do succeed, this is probably the best thing. He wants to try and shift things in his favor, but it's just so cringe. Just seeing him trying to pretend to be Jim in the middle of these situations, and I'm just like, good God, what the hell is going on? It's just kind of sad, and it just kind of makes and like it. But at the same time, as I'm watching this, I'm just smiling like, oh God, this is not ending well. But it's just like a train wreck. It's horrible to witness, yet you can't turn away. It's just kind of hilarious, and I love it. And of course, it all comes to a head when Ulrich has to Ulrich to try and save his ass, and Mrs. Hertz argues for transferring him down to ninth grade remedial. He says, "You know what it's like to be. You were all teenagers once. The hormones, the relationships, all that stuff. It's gonna be stressful and tiring. He's probably going through a lot, and it manages to hit the mark with everybody but her, as she's just determined to send him down there. Like actually, that's another thing. Mrs. Hertz kind of was being a little bit of a bitch in the beginning of the episode, because I don't know what other people have had, and I'm sure there are dick teachers out there, but the way she acted with the students was just kind of mean. Like, when she handed out tests, she intentionally called them out in front of the class. I think, like, if she was actually concerned or upset, I feel like that she should have talked to the students in private without anyone watching. But the fact that she did it in public is just like, no, sorry, I don't like that. But it's just like seeing her just like, no, I'm not letting him get away from this. He's had many chances. It's just like, again, I can understand her getting upset with that, and part of me does feel like that, and part of me does kind of understand that, but at the same time, it's like, okay, you're like, wow, you really want him gone, don't you? It's just like really, it's kind of it's slightly, it's slightly irritating, but slightly amusing, and it does also I do think it's kind of funny seeing Jim just kind of get comeuppance for something he didn't do. Again, I feel sorry for him, but it's again hijinks, and the hijinks. So I guess my biggest point is the hijinks are actually funny, and ultimately I just kind of like seeing or kind of sweating bullets throughout the whole thing. But another thing I liked though, and this is actually when the group loses Ulrich. I mentioned back during when I looked at the Franz Hopper episode that one of the things I honestly didn't like about that episode was the group's reaction when they learned that them using the scanners was possibly putting them in danger, and that Yumi was already showing signs of cellular degradation. While I understood the group's reactions, them being upset, possibly angry, and scared, I felt like they went a little overboard with it, and I think unfairly treated Jeremy. Well, I can understand them getting upset at Jeremy in the beginning. They kept going forward. They kept going like it. They kept giving him crap and acting like he did this on purpose. That he should be ashamed that he's not their friend, even though they've spent enough time with him that they should know that this was something he shouldn't have done. Again, I can understand them feeling upset in the beginning, but not as long as they were. They should have eventually realized, no, we understand. It was an accident. Like again, we understand it's an accident. But here, though, when they lose Ulrich, they only get that from one person, Yumi. And again, like back with Franz Hopper, it's understandable in the beginning, but thankfully, unlike Franz Hopper, where the pressure is just continually piled on Jeremy to the point where it's getting ridiculous, here it's just it just simply snaps at her. It's just a simple snap from Yumi, because after they lose Ulrich, Jeremy says, I'll keep working until I can find him," and Yumi says, "Yeah, I know, but it's your fault. He's lost in the first place. It's because you messed up," and then she runs away. That's a realistic reaction, and thankfully after that they don't press it. We just see the group be in mourning and just kind of sad after that. They don't push it down. In fact, Odd and Aelita end up coming by his room later and end up asking, how is things going? Because they know that Jeremy's probably just as concerned as they are. Again, these reactions make sense in the beginning, but after you have enough time to calm down, I feel like that once you should realize it's not that the person that they're probably just that Jeremy's probably feeling just as guilty. And again, the snap makes sense at first, but eventually you have to calm down. And I'm not saying you have to feel better. God no, you lost a friend. That's terrible. But at the same time, there's the rational part of your brain will eventually come out, and it makes sense for Yumi to have this reaction at the time because while she and Ulrich are pretty much in the friend zone now, she still cares about him and they still have a history. There are still feelings there, just neither of them want to act on it because again, they've been there, it's complicated, and they kind of want to and at least Yumi wants to push that aside for now. So it makes sense for her to actually have this kind of reaction and again, I appreciate the episode for not just kind of nailing it in. I don't because yeah, I didn't like that in Franz Hopper, so I like that reaction. It's a better emotional reaction. It feels stronger. It feels more compelling. It makes more sense, and I'm glad they don't just try to just kind of like drive it right into our skulls. So yeah. But otherwise, though, what do I think of the? But otherwise, though, I do still think the episode is good. I like the situation. I like how things evolve. I love the cringe hijinks. I like the cringy hijinks, which I think are actually really good. I like seeing them try to solve it. I like seeing Xana taking advantage of the situation, and overall think it's a really good episode. So yeah, yeah. Overall, good episode, and yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you next week. Take care.